themselves. And they said that somebody really ought to be looking into it because nobody at the Park Service was. Well, I left the park the following day, called a couple friends in law enforcement, told them what I found out, and said, hey, see if there's anything to this, and see if there's disappearances there that haven't been solved. A few hours later, I get a call back, and they said, oh, yeah, there's quite a few disappearances from there, and there appears to be something unusual. That kind of started it all, started the focus on the National Park Service. I filed a series of Freedom of Information Act requests. They have a very large contingent of federally trained law enforcement police officers that patrol the park area. They've all gone to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. They're highly trained. They are good police officers, and they know how to do the right job. I filed a request against the police department for the National Park Service for a list of missing people inside their system. I get a call back from an attorney from the National Park Service asking why I wanted the information. And I said, well, I was just interested in the numbers and we're doing a little research. And he said, well, National Park Service doesn't keep track of missing people like that. They don't have any numbers. They don't keep track. They don't have a list of names. And originally I thought maybe it was some kind of semantics, and so I worked with some other people and we refiled. Got a call back again, the same thing. We don't have a list. We never have had a list. And, George, any medium or small police department almost in the nation, you could walk into their police chief and say, hey, can you give me a list of missing people from your department? And within a matter of minutes, probably no more than an hour or two, he would give you a list.
He's probably got them up on his bulletin board behind his desk.
Exactly. And for sure, they're up on their website as well. But the National Park Service claims no knowledge of this. And when I pushed them a little further, they stated, and I'll quote this, we rely on the institutional memory of our employees for those things.
Jeez, that makes no sense, David.
No. And so you could feel the roadblock that they were throwing, and I talked to a whole series of law enforcement people about it, and they said, Dave, there is no way they're not keeping this information. They've got to have it. Well, keep plodding along as the years go by and the research keeps getting thicker. You start to realize that there's also disappearances in national forests very similar to what's happening in national parks. And what I laid out was a series of young adults, young children, say 2 to 6 years old, where they went missing from and where they were found. And many times these kids would be found miles away in a rural environment where there's no roads. And the trek, when you approach their parents with, they'd say, oh, my 2-year-old can't walk that far. Or they'd be found thousands of feet up in elevation from where they were last seen.
Alive or dead?
Dead.
Oh.
And, those kind of things strike you as highly unusual. And when the parents say, hey, there's no way my child could have gone that distance, and being a parent, you know how far your child can travel.
Of course.
Well, since we're talking about young kids right now, just today, news broke out of a place called Austin, Manitoba. Austin's 50 miles west of Manitoba, west of Winnipeg. It's a very, very rural area. A lot of farm country. A 2-year-old boy named Chase Martins, Martens, was playing outside his farmhouse. His dad was on one side of the farmhouse. His mom was inside. He had a couple sisters that were also in the house. His mom sees the son run around the side of the house, and she thought he was going to go play on the tractor like he always does.
Okay.
They had a couple dogs in the yard, and she said the dogs always follow this boy around. Well, after 10 minutes, she didn't see him. She goes out to the yard. He's gone. The dad starts searching. The dogs just laid in the back porch the whole time. And make a long story short, that happened at 6 o'clock Tuesday night. All through the night last night, 200 searchers and canines searched that area. The Winnipeg helicopter from their police department came in and flew FLIR, forward-looking radar, all over the farm fields and forests around there. Nothing.
Oh.
Today they put 300 ground searchers there, along with an RCMP airplane, and the Winnipeg helicopter came back. And as of right now, we're speaking, that boy can't be found.
What a nightmare for the parents, David. An absolute nightmare.
And when you go online, George, and you see the searchers are doing the right thing. They're marching almost shoulder to shoulder through the fields out there, and that's what they're out there, fields. And then there's interspersed with trees and a little bit of ground cover, nothing serious. And especially the time of the year, a helicopter flying with FLIR right now should be able to light up that whole area and see if there's somebody there that's emitting heat. Now, in probably a very high percentage of these cases, one of the profile points I write about in my books is that oftentimes these victims are found in an area that has been searched sometimes 10, 20 times.
And they know that they have not missed the body, and then they come back, like you say, the 10th time, and there it is.
Exactly. And the searchers are befuddled. A few years back, I was making a presentation in front of the largest search and rescue organization in the world. And I was talking about this just like I am with you right now and kind of laying out the groundwork. And in Alaska, the Alaska State Troopers take charge of all search and rescue in the state. And about halfway through my talk, there were some questions, and this trooper stood up and said, "Dave, you're saying what we all know and we don't want to talk about. But we've all had it happen to us, and it's unexplainable. How this is happening and how these people end up in an area that we've covered completely, and bam, they're right in the middle of it, makes no sense."
And they don't want to talk about it. Why? Are they afraid?
Well, I think that some organizations in the search and rescue business want to keep their faux pas, which they consider faux pas, to themselves. I personally don't think, and I've never said that this is a search and rescue issue, they're not doing a competent job, etc. I don't think that when they're searching, it's there.
And we've talked before, David, many times. We do not push you for an answer because you're not going to give us one anyways. But we do talk about possibilities, and I want everybody to know that tonight. We're not going to say we think it's this, but we're going to talk about possibilities, and then you can decide what you think. But I've got to tell you, it is as bizarre as anything I've ever heard, and it's got to be for you too, David.
Well, what's tough, George, and you're a parent, you know this, that when you see these stories come across, like this one with Chase that I just talked to you about, it tugs at everybody's heart who's a parent.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
You know, I can't say that I can feel for the parents and know what they're going through, but I can tell you that it's got to be one of the most horrific things a human can go through, not knowing what's happened to their child.
You know, I used to, when I was younger, with my children, I would see people at a mall or shopping center with a dog leash on their kid, and it was attached to his back, you know, with some kind of an apparatus. And I used to think, David, that was the cruelest thing I could ever see, until it dawned on me they're petrified of the kid wandering away. And, you know, they want to give him about 20 feet, and, you know, they kind of like tug him back when he gets too far. I don't think it's that bad anymore.
You know, I think that there's going to be those people who thought like you did. But once you read the cases, how a parent says, my son, my little 2-year-old, was right behind me. He can't run that fast. I turned around and he's gone.
Just gone.
Exactly.
Just
so
gone.
It makes you think, well, maybe those devices might be pretty good.
In terms of the sex of the missing person, is it more male than female, or is it the same? Does it balance out?
I think as you get older and you start talking about men or adult women, on that end of the scale, it's more men. I think at the younger end of the scale, say between 2 and 8, it's almost a balancing point there.
Balancing, okay.
There's been a lot of young girls and a lot of young boys that have disappeared and been found under unusual circumstances.
And in terms of those people out in the parks when they get a little older, would it skew more men than women, or is it about 50-50? People who are just out there, they have a good time.
I think there's more men. Not by a huge percentage, but I do think there are more men. And a lot of times when the men disappear in those park settings, many, many times they're never found.
David has some amazing cases, and we've got some new ones we're going to talk about as well. And, of course, the one he just mentioned, how sad it is for those parents up there in Canada to be searching for their little one who simply just disappeared. And I wonder, David, how far away was their house from the road to rule out the possibility of some passerby coming by and picking the kid up?
They talked about it briefly in one article, and it said that there was a dirt road that came up to the house. But coming from law enforcement, and you got to apply logic to this, is that a pedophile or somebody who's trying to prey on a young person like this, one of the last things they want to do is be seen. And if you're going up to an isolated farmhouse somewhere in the middle of nowhere, number one, those people carry guns.
That's right. And the mother and the father are going to hear a vehicle that comes up that kind of road. David, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk more about missing 411. And our special guest tonight for 3 hours of the program, David Paulides, as we talk about missing 411, people who simply vanish. An incredible story. And we'll take your calls later on tonight with David as well, so you'll become part of the program. And welcome back to Coast. David Paulides with us. David, on one of my computers in the studio, I've got my wallpaper on the computer looks like a national park. I'm going to get rid of it right after this show. Get that away. So how are you doing on your Kickstarter campaign in the movie? Did you wrap that up, or are you still doing it?
We are done with the Kickstarter long ago, many months ago. We
Good.
Went 50% over our goal. We totally blew the numbers out.
Super.
Right now the movie is done with the first stage of editing. It's going to colorization and sound within the next 2 weeks. So we're right on target. Everything's going real good.
Good.
Appreciate the help you gave us.
And you're happy with it?
Oh, I'm ecstatic with it.
Okay, I can't wait to see it. And if you get us a little clip, we'll put it up on the website when the time comes, okay?
Absolutely.
Now, back to these. I'm going to ask you a mathematical question. And this would be, out of 10 people who disappear, what percent do you think are people who merely wander off and get lost? Whether they die or they're found later, not the case. But what percent of 10 do you think simply wander off?
I think it's a very high percentage. And when we go through the vetting process to get to the cases that we'll talk about, we take away all of the ambiguous nature associated with that. There's a lot of people who voluntarily want to disappear. Maybe they have mental health issues, they're suicidal, whatever. If there's anything about that in their profile and their background, we won't look at that. There's an entire series of things that we look at that kind of narrow it down to what we're really focusing on. One of the big things is geographical clustering. There's 58 geographical clusters of these missing people that fit this profile in North America. One of them happens to just be very near Winnipeg, where we talked about earlier. So in these geographical clusters, they go back not decades, sometimes centuries, with these same type of disappearances. We have one case going back to 1752 that's almost an exact hit to what we're talking about.
Jeez.
So I hear what you're saying. To give you a number, I'm sure it's extremely high because there aren't a large percentage of standard missing person cases that fit our profile.
Now, a serial killer wandering around the park system, I would say that might be pretty low.
I think, and we've talked about this on the air, I think it's infinitesimally small. The reason being is that I think it's been 5 years now. The law says that if you have a concealed weapons license, you can carry a gun in a park. Well, I live in Colorado, and I know on the trails in Colorado, probably 80 to 90% of the people on the trail carry guns. So if there's a serial killer out there, very soon there's just going to be a shootout on the trail.
No question.
Yep. Somebody's going to die. And you never hear about these type of abductions on the trail, killings, shootings. It just doesn't happen.
The next I'm going to cluster in a grouping of the unusual, the supernatural, and it could be Bigfoot is grabbing somebody, a UFO is beaming people up, perhaps a portal, some kind of other dimension that they fall into and they can't find their way back. I'm going to cluster all those together, David. And, based on just reading your books and the work you've done, I would say that's a probability that cannot be ruled out.
So in this first hour, we were going to talk about just cases in national parks, forests, and things. And then in that second hour, we were going to talk about my last book, and that is disappearances of young men near rivers, creeks, ponds, etc., where they just disappeared, sometimes amongst a group of many people Nobody saw them leave. They just vanish, and they're found later on in this body of water. Well, to me, I mean, there's a lot of people out there who say, oh, it's got to be Bigfoot, or it's got to be this, or it's got to be that. I have yet, and I'm not just saying this, but there's thousands of friends on Facebook that comment daily about this.
Yes.
I personally do not know, George, of anyone who has read all of the books and has said, yep, it's got to be this. Because once they read the books, the variables don't fit any one specific entity or idea. And many people think that there could be something unilateral going on. You know Richard Dolan.
Oh, real well.
So Richard and I talk. We have these really great conversations because he's a super smart guy.
Oh, he really is. He's a human think tank, isn't he?
Oh, yes. And he said, Dave, after reading the books, he goes, I think sometimes that it's got to be some overreaching intelligence that is so far beyond our comprehension in how it works, how it targets, how it deciphers when and where to do it, that we couldn't even understand it probably if they explained it.
Well, you know what? You can't rule that out.
Right.
You cannot rule it out. It is so baffling, so frustrating. Man, I tell you what, I would be hesitant to take a group of people or kids into a national park system without watching them every second. And you can't do that.
No, you can't.
It's impossible.
You were talking about the movie. I was in Larimer County, Colorado, and we were talking to the undersheriff about a case that's in the movie. And one of the questions I always ask one of these administrators in any sheriff's department is, I said, hey, do you have any open cases out there that fit with what we're talking about? And this undersheriff in Larimer County said, yeah, I sure do. Well, in past shows and in my past books, I've talked about there seems to be an abnormal number of people that have a German heritage. And I almost fell out of my chair when the sheriff came back and handed me the report on this guy who went missing in Rocky Mountain National Park in February of 1983. He was 27 years old. His name was Rudy Loder.
That sounds German.
Rudy was a German national on vacation. He had prior time with the German Mountain Army Corps.
Oh, my
He
gosh.
was a veteran of 2 different Himalayan trips, and he was considered an expert in mountaineering and extreme weather conditions. Well, he came out to see a friend that lived outside of Denver, and he was traveling with him, and he said, hey, just give me a couple, 3 days, and I want to go into the back country of the park, and I just want to see what it's like here. He took all of his equipment. His friend dropped him off. He had some cross-country skis, and he goes, I'll meet you here in 3 days.
And he's well-trained. I mean, really well-trained, right?
I don't think you get much better, George. This guy was elite of the elite and in prime physical shape. So he didn't make it back. His friend called the sheriff. The sheriff came out and searched. And it was a 4-day search, 40 searchers. They did find a small cave that they know that he dug because there was a food cache in it that he had put there. So they do overflights. There were 2 helicopters committed by the Park Service. They don't find anything. But what's more perplexing to this is that we're looking at 30-plus years now. They've never found him, which, okay, maybe you don't find him.
Maybe you don't find him, yeah.
But where's the skis? Where's the bindings? Where's his belt? Where's his boots that he was wearing? He's never found.
Yeah, that's weird. That is weird. And you can't just simply think, all right, somebody killed him and took his skis. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Not where this guy was. He was in an area called Thunder Pass.
There's probably nobody else there.
Exactly. No, you and I wouldn't even think about going there.
No.
And an avalanche, they came back the following year. They searched. They never found him. And so there wasn't any avalanche activity in the area when they searched. There was nothing. It's like, whoosh, he's gone.
What is the tie-in with being German? That's weird.
That is very strange. And in my last book, Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, it dealt with young men who disappeared, there were a lot of these with this German heritage from the Wisconsin area that vanished under these highly unusual circumstances. So I really don't know what to think of it, other than when you put the faces of these boys, young men, up next to each other, they all kind of look the same. It's weird.
What percent of those that disappear are then found dead later? Physically found?
Oh, I would say that's probably, of the ones I've written about, 70% maybe.
Are any of them mauled or torn apart like an animal would have gotten them?
An extremely small percent, probably less than 3%.
Wow.
And in those cases, in fact, there's one case out of the Yukon Territory I can think of where they thought that a bear might have attacked him. Well, it's strange because in reports written in articles and newspapers and things, it says that there's bear scat found at the scene with his clothing in the scat. Well, I interviewed the natural resource officer on that case. His name was Bart Schleier, the stud of all studs, a mountain man, a graduate of Montana State, and an expert on bear. And the natural resource officer who investigated that case for Yukon said, Dave, it was an absolute lie. There was no clothing. I don't know where they got that. I don't know who said it, but it didn't come from me, and I was the guy in charge of the investigation.
If anybody dies out in the wilderness, will an animal eat a dead body or not?
Oh, yeah.
They would.
Oh, yeah.
See, so that's weird, too. You know, if they're out there in the wilderness, they're dead, they're a food source for something, and they're not eaten. That's strange.
Well, if you think about that, the point I made earlier about found in a place that was previously searched. So there's one case in particular where they took the same trail out to find this boy for a week. They don't find him. The 8th day, they're going, hundreds of people go out the same trail. And on the 8th day, they're getting up, they leave, and there's a tree that's been knocked down or fell down, is laying across the trail. And George, the boy's body is laying on top of the tree.
No way. Oh.
Now, I don't care who you are. You've got to think, there's a message there somewhere.
That's right.
They for sure want us to find that body. But then my question is, where was this boy during the previous times? And in search and rescue, the coroners and the medical examiners are never thinking like you and I. The search and rescue professionals are thinking, hey, we found the body, great, our job's done.
Yeah.
Now, in my last book, where the people were found in the water's a different environment in that you can gauge, based on the temperature of the water, how long somebody's there based on the degradation of the body. Well, some super smart medical examiners on a few of these cases were really paying attention, and they realized, the guy's been missing for 2 weeks. He only shows indications of being in the water for 3 days. Where has he been for the last 7 to 10 days?
Exactly.
And a lot of medical examiners don't want to rock the boat. And there's 2 of them that I talk to regularly about this. They know something really strange is going on. They know that it's not normal for them not to find a cause of death. And in the cases I write about, a high percentage of time, the coroners can't find a cause of death.
That's strange, too. Does anybody hear, those that have been with people who disappear, does anybody hear screams or shouting or anything like that?
It's not the norm by a very high percentage. Most of the time, it's nothing. It's like the dad will say, well, the child was right by me, and I turned around and he was gone. There was a case in Tennessee a few months ago where a grandma took a little boy for a walk, and she said, well, yeah, he was right here with us, and I turned my back, and he was gone. And you hear this time after time, and you think, how could it, especially a really small child, get such a far distance that they won't hear you, you can't see them, and then they bring the dogs in, the canines in, and they can't track them. That's not normal.
Are the parents generally the chief suspect with police when something like this happens, David?
I think at the beginning, it's whoever is with that child last. They have to take that hard look.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. If I was the parent, I'd say, hey, take me right now, put me on the polygraph so you can exclude me and get on with your work.
Yep.
But no, you're right. They do take that hard look. And in the cases I've talked about with you over the years, every time the parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever, they're not suspects.
And, we talked about the case here in Canada, and, of course, a lot in the United States we'll get into. Is this happening worldwide, or is it just restricted to North America?
No, it's a worldwide issue, and the cases are so cookie-cutter that when you read about them in the books, some of the comments I've had, it said, it's almost like reading repetition, and after a while it gets boring because the factors involved are so identical. But if I don't lay it out and you don't see for yourself that this is the exact way it is, it's easy to discount it and say, it's not really the way he says it is. But when I lay out police report language of what the police say and how the canine handlers say their dogs reacted and how the overflights with the FLIR and the planes see nothing, how can that be?
Yeah. And now, the dogs, do they not pick up the scent, or they just don't want to follow it?
It's all the above. I've had in reports say that the dog walked in a circle, laid down in front of my feet, and either had no interest or didn't want to go down the trail, or there was no scent. But they know that the victim had to have gone that direction in their mind because of the statements from the people that were there.
The disappearances are primarily in these park systems, or could it happen in good old suburban neighborhood?
Well, I think that this example out of Winnipeg is perfect. I mean, it can happen in almost any rural area, and that's the way I started with this. As it's evolved, if you stay with those profile points and you apply it to a broader spectrum, as some people have recommended I did years ago, you start to see, son of a gun, you can walk slowly into an urban area, and then under some circumstances, this applies. And I've written about them a few times. Not normal. There aren't a lot, but there's a few. There's a couple cases out of the Carolinas where a boy went to sleep in a house with his aunt and their dog.
In the house?
In the house. The alarm was on in the house. 20 minutes later, the aunt's phone rings, and it's her husband saying, hey, how's it going? How's our nephew? Whatever. And she looks, and the dog's gone and the boy's gone. And the alarm didn't go off.
The alarm didn't go off. It should have.
And just so happens that there was a second boy that disappeared within miles of that location a few years before that, disappeared, also wasn't found. Two boys in the same proximity, very similar circumstances, were never found.
Very, very strange indeed. David, give us your website.
It's first of all, don't go to Amazon and buy the books. Those are resellers charging exorbitant prices.
Aha.
Okay. We sell them on our website. It's Can-Am, like Canadian American, CanAmMissing.com.
Super. We're with David Paulides. We're talking about his Missing 411 series. I've got to tell you, folks, one of the most riveting stories I have ever heard in my career as a broadcaster since 1969. That's a long, long time. We're going to come back later on with David Paulides, of course, and take your calls. But next hour, we're going to get into some more specific cases, new cases of disappearance, and it's just chilling, absolutely chilling. So stick with us, and David's going to have a movie out soon, and we'll let you know all about that as well. And if the movie's anywhere as close to the book, and I'm sure it will be, it'll chill you, but you got to watch it. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And, of course, our special guest tonight, David Paulides, as we talk about his work, Missing 411, People Who Simply Vanish. We'll be back with more with David in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast, our special guest, David Paulides, tonight. David, let's get into some of these cases that you've been working on. How about the one from the University of Wyoming student? What was the person's name? Morgan Hyman? Or Heimer?
Yeah, and a very good young man, University of Wyoming student, and he was one of the guys working on one of the drift boats going down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon National Park. I just got the report on this about a week ago from the National Park Service. When it happened, Morgan was with a group of people that going down on a float trip. They pulled over at an area that almost every group stops at. There's a small creek that comes in. They walk up the adjoining valley, and there's a small waterfall that goes into a big pool, and the patrons jump off the ledge. They go into the water, and they swim around, and they send a couple of guides from the trip, and Morgan was one of the guides that went up with the people. As they're there, the group's getting ready to go. Morgan and another guy who's the lead guide, he backs up. Morgan's at the back. They're getting ready to leave. The other guy turns around in the report and says he's gone. There's no place to go, George.
He's gone.
Kind of a box canyon at the end of a waterfall. There's no way to get out. There's no place to go. Morgan was last seen wearing a life preserver, carrying a water bottle. The water flow from this creek would probably come up to maybe between your ankles and your knees. There wasn't a lot. When this incident happened, one of the members of this group of the canyon trip called me. This happened June 2nd of this last year. And they said, Dave, nobody on this group could figure out what happened to Morgan. He disappeared so quickly and so fast, nobody knows. In the National Park Service report, it said there's no indication that he ever came out of the canyon. There's no indication he flowed downstream. There's no indication that he even attempted to come off the trail, and nobody can say where he was. It's a very, very unusual case.
They all are strange. Now, when you said that the Park Service sent you the report, are they starting to cooperate now with you?
No, that's pretty funny. A few years ago, they classified me as a commercial requester. And that gave them the ability in their own world to charge me whatever they wanted to for the reports. And fans out there heard about this and said, Dave, let me request the report, and they'll charge, a normal person $5, $6, $7 for the report. They want to charge me hundreds of dollars for the report. So it's one of those fans out there that got this report for me and forwarded on, and that's how I got it. No, they aren't cooperating at all.
Is there anybody that you can go to, a higher up, and say, look, enough is enough, I need more information?
There probably is, George, but I don't think that the Park Service looks at me as being a friend.
Really?
I think they want these things to
Quiet.
stay within the confines of the Park Service, and they don't want the public to hear about it.
And the fact that you publicize it, now with us, of course, we're probably not very welcome.
I'm not high on their list of friends.
No, not at all. What other cases are you looking at?
Well, there's an interesting set of cases in Chiricahua National Monument. This is in Arizona, kind of in the southeastern part of the state. And pretty remote area. It's a national monument, which means it's under the control of the National Park Service. In this location, in January 13th of 1980, a temporary superintendent of the park, a ranger named Paul Fugate, disappeared. The primary superintendent was gone for the week. Paul was in charge. He told some people there at the park that he was just going to take a walk into the backcountry. He'd be back. He never came back. Huge search. A file probably the size of a large cardboard box I've got on this case. Baffling. But that's not the story that I'm here to talk to you about. But this area around Chiricahua is a cluster zone that if you don't include Paul and the two other people I'm going to tell you about, there's 4 other people that have disappeared around this area. Now, June 19th of this year, a 44-year-old woman named Janet Castrojohn, she had a brain injury when she was young. She's considered disabled, traveling with her mom and dad in an RV. Her dad is a physician. They went into this place called Rustler's Campground inside Chiricahua. The mom and the daughter get out of the van, and they're walking towards a pay station to pay their campground fee. And then the mom says, hey, I'm going to go use the restroom. You want to come with me? And the girl says, the young lady says, no, I'm going to go back to Dad in the RV. She says, fine. Short distance back to the RV, a short distance to the restroom. The mom uses the restroom, comes back. She doesn't the girl, Janet, never made it back to the RV. Park Service and the Sheriff's Department bring in bloodhounds, ground teams, air teams. No tracks, no blood, no sounds, no scent, no nothing. Absolutely nothing. She's gone. June 19th, 2015. Now, 3 months later, September 13th, 2015, same campground. A man named Lawrence Cosden, Kosdan, went to the campground. He was from a city in Arizona, and he liked to go to this one place and walk around, carry his cat. There's a receipt on his dashboard stating that he entered the park on the 13th. People saw him on a hike with his cat. Well, he didn't return home, and eventually on the 17th, 4 days later, some friends report him as missing. They thought he'd be in the campground. They find his car on the 20th. A 3-day search, they found nothing. And the search was terminated on this event because of bad weather per the sheriff's office. So now you have Fugate the ranger, Castor John, and Cosden, two in a 3-month period that disappear and aren't found, and coupling with Fugate. And what I've said about this is that it's rare that two people go missing in the same location in the same year. This is a rare event. To not either one of them been found or some part of what they were carrying been found, no scent, no nothing.
It just keeps adding to the baffling subject matter here. It's just weird.
It's troubling. That's what it really is. And you'll read articles and they'll say, well, you know, there's a lot of criminals in this area because they come through the area from the border and they're smugglers and things. But you never hear about any arrests of any of these people inside of the monument.
And the other thing, too, David, is the torment that the victims, and I'll call them victims, but the victims' friends or parents go through when they can't find their loved one has got to be one of the worst feelings ever.
You know, one of the things is when I talk to these people, you can just see it in their face, you can feel it in their skin. In Janet's case, her mom and dad came back almost every weekend for the following 3 months looking for their daughter. That's how nerve-wracking it was on that family.
Unbelievable.
Now, the next case to me, should be front-page headlines in every newspaper in the United States.
Oh, jeez.
Joe Keller, 19 years old, disappeared July 23rd of this last year. Bar, Southern Colorado, a place called Cornelius County, near a city called Antonito. He was staying at a guest ranch, a place called Rainbow Trout Ranch. You can look it up. It's owned by a family member. Well, he and a buddy were traveling cross-country, and they had planned to meet his parents at this ranch and spend a week just having fun. It's a beautiful location. Well, the guys got there, and every day in the afternoon, he and his buddy would take a run. And if I put these guys in front of you, George, you'd say, wow, they're in peak physical condition. They're studs. And they went running on a dirt road inside the confines of this dude ranch. And one of the guys that Joe was running with had a GPS watch so they could kind of track their progress. And they're running along, and Joe's friend says, you know, I hear him behind me most of the time. And
I mean, they're relatively close, I would assume. As they jog, they probably jog together.
Exactly. And but at one point, Joe got behind him. Now, there's another key point, and in the books I write about it, is for some reason or another, it's that last person in line who doesn't have any eyes on him is the one that disappears.
You know, I was going to say, you don't want to be the last person, folks, no matter what.
And, in fact, an author for the Huffington Post wrote an article about one of the books, and it titled it, Don't Be Last in Line. Well, Joe was last in line. He disappears. His buddy runs in, tells people, hey, I lost him. They go back out. They look. The Cornelius County Sheriff comes out. They don't have a real big sheriff's department, but they search. They put a drone up. They put FLIR up. They bring a dog to the scene. And in the area where Joe's friend says that Joe was last seen, the dog walked to the end of the road where the forest starts, sat down and just looked and didn't go anywhere. Never found a scent leaving the road. That was it. Now, Joe was from an area called Bradley County, Tennessee, and his dad was a contractor there. I talked to him. His name's Neil. Really nice guy. Completely lost man. Completely.
He's distraught, isn't he?
He's distraught and destroyed. And the Bradley County Sheriff offered to send a platoon of his deputies out to help this little rural county. Originally, Cornelius County said, nope, we've got it handled. Well, Neil said, hey, all the help we can get, we need it. And the county said, no. Eventually they said, yes. The sheriff sent 2 guys out. They searched. They found nothing. Make a long story short, it's gone on now for months and months. I don't know where Joe Keller would have went. He was running with his friend. Everybody was in a good mood. They were going to spend a week there. There's no place to go.
Did the friend ever say, David, how far behind that Joe got?
Yes, he didn't think he got that far behind him. That's what the words were.
I wonder if that's a block, 100 feet, but we don't know that, do we?
And again, there was no sign of an animal attack, no sign of a struggle, no blood, no nothing.
And you would have heard an animal attack, right? I would assume the animal, if it comes out at you, is, once it hits, it's, roaring and everything else.
Yes, exactly.
Or the guy screaming. You're gonna scream for a moment. It's not like you're instantly dead. So
you're gonna fight for your life.
Yeah, exactly. Hollering, calling your buddy back, everything else.
And if the animal did take you, there'd be drag marks, there'd be blood, there'd be hair.
If you were shot, the witnesses would hear the shot.
Exactly.
Even if the body was dragged off, they'd see some of that.
Yep.
It's just they like poof, they're gone.
Very discomforting, and that's in a really, really rural area of southern Colorado, just north of New Mexico.
And you said something that is really fascinating now to me, and that is the last person. That is beyond odds. I don't believe in coincidences. The last person, the person that no one is looking at, and whatever intelligence is behind these disappearances, I think knows that. Get the last person. Not the one on the front. Get the last person. They're doing this on purpose.
So let me really throw a wrench into all this and explain another one. In the 5 books I've written about this, I've talked about a series of disappearances where a car is found off a roadway, inexplicably. Sometimes there's no damage, sometimes there's a little bit of damage.
All right.
The driver's gone. The driver was alone. It usually happens late at night, early in the morning, during darkness, and there's nothing that's found once the car is found. It's like the car's off the road, they're gone.
Are the keys in the car, do we know?
Sometimes they are.
All right.
Most of the time, they find the victim's shoes in close proximity to the vehicle.
The shoes. Scattered or kind of tucked away neatly?
All the above.
Okay.
Now this is one of the weirdest cases, but it fits exactly with what I've talked about, because in a lot of the cases I write about, not only are the shoes missing, but there's clothing missing off the victims' bodies in a lot of these cases. And in a lot of the cases where they're involving young children, the parents said, well, that doesn't make any sense. And in fact, that's really suspicious because my child's too young to even take their own clothes off. So in a case, January 13th, 2015, outside of Fort Worth, Texas, a woman named Lindsay Gardner, 27 years old, and her daughter, Haley Gardner, 13 months old, driving on a rural road 5 miles from their house. They're heading home. It's a rural setting, probably a half mile from a very large lake called Benbrook Lake. Well, they don't come home that night. The next morning, somebody driving down the road sees a car about 200 yards off the roadway that's crashed into a fence through this field. They call the sheriff. The sheriff comes out at 8:30 a.m., looks, airbags deployed on the driver's side, looks around, doesn't see anything.
No driver.
No driver. Gets back in the car and leaves. At 11 o'clock, a fence repairman comes out, and the fence repairman is walking to repair the fence, same kind of path the policeman would have took, and sees 200 yards from the car a scene straight out of some movie, a cheap movie. And he sees a naked woman laying on top of something in this field. And between the car and the woman is clothing that's strewn out, almost like it's dropped. What he sees, he calls the police, what he sees is Lindsay Gardner naked, laying on top of her 13-month-old daughter, who's in a car seat that's laying on the ground.
Is the daughter alive?
Both are deceased.
They're both dead.
Now, here's the strange part. It was cold that night.
As if the other stuff wasn't.
So the other part of the story that's pretty important in that every story I've read, they make a big point of this, is that Lindsay was a teacher at a Baptist church, very religious. Now, in your car is comfort, is heat, is security. These people are found 100 yards from the car, naked, and the coroner initially couldn't find a cause of death and then said it was hypothermia. Now, in the wildest stretches of anyone's imagination, hypothermia is not going to set in 100 yards. And if you're cold, you go back in the car and you get on your cell phone and you call for help.
That's right. Exactly.
Or you walk 100 yards to the road and you wait for a car to come by. Yet both of them die of hypothermia, supposedly, and the mother is naked.
Now, one would assume, if you want to think logically, that some passerby came by and killed her and killed the little kid. You would think. But that doesn't make sense either, does it?
I don't think it holds water at all, George. And I give the medical examiners a difficult time because they don't want to dig hard and really do the outstanding job they should be doing.
Did they, do you know, David, find the cell phone? Did she have a cell phone?
She didn't have one.
She didn't have one.
But
who wouldn't have a cell phone nowadays?
That's strange. But I talk about this case because there's a couple points here that are important. And one of them is that nobody develops hypothermia at 100 yards walking away from a car, number one. Nobody strips their clothing on a cold night. That's number two.
No.
And number three, the important point here is that the sheriff came out, walked to the car, and he never saw the clothing or the bodies. So were they there when he was there 2 hours, 3 hours earlier?
This is strange.
It's a very, very, very disturbing case that's bothered me for a long time, and I wish I understood more about the facts behind it, but I think I've got them all, and it just doesn't jive.
And you have to just wonder what her husband, if she was married. Was she married?
She was married, and very happily married, and the husband was just, as you can imagine, destroyed. This is something you don't get over. Never. It doesn't go away. The suffering, the pain, it's just to imagine what might have happened to them. So no visible injuries to either victim. Coroner originally stated no cause of death, later changed it to hypothermia. 100 yards from the roadway, 100 yards from the car.
David, let's talk about some water-related deaths and disappearances next. Next hour, we'll take your phone calls with David Paulides as we talk about Missing 411. What an amazing story. I've still got more cases to go over with him as well. So we'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast to Coast. David Paulides with us with just remarkable stories. And David, do these stories come to you now? Are people emailing you these stories saying, hey, somebody just disappeared here? How do you find them all?
Stories of everyone who disappears, and I think people really need to read the books, go to your library, get them, whatever, and understand the profile that we're looking at. We're not interested in everyone who disappears. It's disappointing that they do, but I don't have the time for it. We're looking for the specific profile points that point to these people fitting a specific class that disappears, and that's what we're looking for.
Let's talk about some water-related disappearances and tragedies as well. Let's pick it up with Martise Wyndham. What happened there?
So the cases we're going to talk about for the next 3 or 4 here all occurred in the greater Minneapolis-St. Paul area.
Now that's weird.
It is very strange. And in my last book, I identified a series of places in North America and in other countries where this is happening at a very, very high degree. The number one place in the world right now where this is happening is in Manchester in the UK. Manchester has a series of canals and rivers that crisscross the city. And they have had a number of young men that have fallen into these canals and died. And a large percentage of them, the medical examiner said, we don't know what killed them. And in some of these canals, you can stand up and walk out, but they're dead. So Manchester, the UK. Now, let's talk about St. Paul. Martise Wyndham, 38 years old, disappeared November 7th, 2015 from Savage, Minnesota, the city just southwest, right on the periphery of Minneapolis, St. Paul. He owned a credit recovery business. He coached youth basketball in Lakeville. He lived just south of Park Drive and east of Highway 13. On the 7th, he put on his running shoes and he told his family he was going to go for a run. He never came back. Now, I've written many stories about these people that have gone for a run, never come back, later found in a body of water. His body was found almost 4 months later on the 11th of March in a holding pond behind a Target store on Highway 13. And when you look at this holding pond from the air, 3/4 of it is surrounded by real tall trees and thick brush. Now, as of today, there's no cause of death released by the coroner.
Still.
Nope.
Huh.
Now, I wrote about a case in my last book, the case of a boy named Joshua Swalls, 22 years old, from Indianapolis. He disappeared on 11/2/12, went to a friend's house to visit near midnight, arrived, socialized, having a good time. He left his phone in the residence, and he said, hey, I'm just going to go outside for a second. He was never seen again. Now, there's a retention pond next to a Kruger store about a 1/4 mile away. And rescue workers that were looking for him the next day found his shoe kind of on the periphery of the pond. Indianapolis Fire put a tactical dive team in this pond. It's not a big pond, George. It's probably 2 or 3 times the size of a normal swimming pool, if that.
And probably not very deep, I would guess.
No. This tactical dive team spent the day, cleared it, said there's nothing there. Now, fast forward to the 23rd, an employee of the store is walking by the pond, and he sees the body in the water. Fire department comes back out. They pull the kid out, no shoes, no socks on. Now, here's the important point, and something that's overlooked by some investigators. So he went missing on the 2nd of November, 2012. He's found 21 days later in that pond. The coroner said that the body appeared to be in the water 1 week.
It would be like falling apart if it was in the water that long.
So his parents said in a lengthy interview that their son, number one, never took his socks off ever, even when he was walking around their house. He was a really good swimmer, and he would no way ever in November go in a pond for a swim. Now, the coroner ruled it accidental drowning, and he hedged it. He said, well, it's possibly accidental drowning, meaning to me, the guy's not real sure. And when you look at the totality of what I've done in this last book, and there's probably been 50 more cases this year just like this, important point, the coroner said it appeared the body had been in the water for 1 week. Where was he for 2 weeks out of that?
And how did he get out there? A 1/4 mile away when he simply went outside that house for just a little bit, and then he disappeared.
Now, another key point to this is that he didn't have a cell phone with him. I've written that it appears as though that's one of the target points.
Well, you know, I was just going to ask you that, because of the other case of the woman found dead with her little baby. You said no cell phone. This no cell phone. I find that to be ironic, especially with a 22-year-old young man They live on their phones. They live on their phones.
For sure.
Now, in this case, he forgot his phone, right?
Well, he left it inside the apartment, and they didn't say what the reason was behind it, but even that, I mean, how many people leave their phones just sitting around?
Unless they forget it, not a lot.
Right. Now, in this last book of mine called A Sobering Coincidence, I talk about a number of these disappearances where the person that disappeared is on the phone with somebody as they vanish. And what they say is completely bizarre. Sometimes they'll say, "Where are you? I need you here now." Boom, phone goes dead. They're found in a river, 3 miles away 30 days later. Now, here's probably one of the most bizarre cases you will ever hear. Henry McCabe, 32 years old, he's an auditor for the state of Minnesota, a revenue auditor, very smart man, did a lot of public speaking to businesses and things about revenue Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
On the 7th of September, he went out with some friends, and at 2:30 approximately, he tells a buddy, "Hey, just drop me at the gas station. I'm going to get something to eat, and I'm just going to walk home." He gets dropped at the gas station, and at 2:28, the phone goes to he makes a call to his wife, Karen McCabe, and it goes to voicemail, and it's recorded. And the wife said, "It sounds like he was injured." There's a pause. Somebody says, "Stop it." But intermixed with that for 2 minutes is a series of moans, growls, and groans that are out of this world strange. And anybody can go online, Google Henry McCabe growls and sounds on a voicemail, and it's out there right now.
And you'll hear the groans?
You will. It's very explicit. It's nasty. Now, he disappears on September 7th. His wife gets this voicemail and thinks, "What the heck is going on?" They search everywhere for him. On November 2nd, almost 2 months later, his body is found in a place called Rush Lake. And a kayaker is going down the lake, finds the body in the water, calls the sheriff. The sheriff comes out, pulls the body out, and they say it's freshwater drowning. Now, in my last book, I talk about something called GHB. GHB is almost like a paralytic drug that makes you know what's happening to your body, but you can't move. And years ago, it used to be called a date rape drug. Now, in several of the cases I chronicled, the coroner went above and beyond their normal screening for drugs, and they screened for other things. And they found these super exorbitantly high levels of GHB in several of these people's bodies. Now, when you read things as though the parent says, "Yeah, he was a great swimmer," but if they had these super high levels of GHB in their system, they couldn't swim. So if a determination comes down that they drowned, well, they didn't drown because they didn't try. They drowned because they couldn't get out. They couldn't move. Now, and you start to think, well, did somebody at a bar drug them? No. And the reason being is that the levels of the GHB that are found in their bodies, when it's tested for, are so far beyond the norms of what we see in people that have had date rape drugs. You have to think, how is it being administered, and when is it being administered? And GHB is one of those things that's a naturally occurring agent in the human body. But one reason that it's a really good drug to use on somebody is that it comes out of your system really fast. And out of the, 20 drugs that a normal medical examiner screens for, GHB is not one.
These cases just get stranger and stranger and stranger, David.
So, again, that's the second case on the periphery of Minneapolis-St. Paul. Go to October 3rd, 2015. Joe Brune, 23 years old. He was captain of his football, hockey, and baseball teams when he was in high school. He was a graduate of Anoka College, and he was going to his friend's wedding at a Holiday Inn in Otsego, Minnesota. He was last seen walking across the street to a cornfield from the bar in the hotel. Everyone thought he was going to the bathroom or something. He never came back. He was reported missing. When this happened, George, I could have told you exactly where they're going to find this man, because no more than 400 yards on the other side of this field is the Mississippi River.
Another water case.
And that's exactly where they found him days later. And they determined it was drowning with alcohol as a contributing factor. Now, go to March 25th, 2015, 4:59 in the afternoon, 21-year-old William Hempy. At 4:59, he calls his dad. This is in Rochester, Minnesota, just south of Minneapolis. Kid played competitive tennis, volunteered at the Mayo Clinic, was going to school and had come home for just a short period of time, was set to graduate from the University of Illinois in 6 weeks, outstanding student, outstanding person. Came home for the weekend. His dad bought him a new pair of Asics shoes, and he went for a run. His phone was last pinged at 55th Street Northwest and West River Road. He didn't come home that afternoon. He was reported as missing. His body's found a month and 1 day later at 7 p.m. in a pond in a quarry on Foster Arend Park. Such a strange place to find a body. I can't even explain to you how strange it is.
Cause of death ever revealed?
You know, and that's obviously one of the things everyone's concerned about, and no cause of death was released by the coroner.
Why not? Why don't they release these things?
You know, maybe they don't release it because when they can't find it, they don't want to be embarrassed. That
could be. Or maybe it's so horrific they don't want to scare everybody.
Very true. Now, a very recent case, June 6th, 2016. If you notice, all of these guys that I'm telling you about, outstanding people, good athletes, usually doing some type of athletic event when they disappear.
And they're all guys.
They're all guys. Luke Gabbert, G-A-B-B-E-R-T, 19 years old. He was a freshman at Wesleyan University in Delaware, Ohio, just north of Columbus. He was considered a star soccer player, phenomenal athlete, disappeared just overnight. He was found the next morning on February 6th in a creek north of campus. It's called Delaware Run Creek. Key point, coroner can't determine the cause of death. Family's devastated. Nobody knows what happened to him, how he got there, why he died. Now, the thing is that as you go forward on these, if you don't know what you're looking for, there's something called plausible deniability.
Mm-hmm.
So if a lot of these guys have a lot of alcohol in their system, people are going to say, oh, you know, he was just an idiot. He walked, he fell in the river, and he drowned.
That's right. Hit his head, something.
Right. But there's a few of these cases where the plausible deniability is out. Gabbert didn't have anything in his system. A few of these cases, the person had no alcohol in their system. And even, I try to explain when I'm giving a talk to a group, even if there's alcohol in your system and you're a good swimmer, you're going to swim out of there. And the total number of cases where the coroner can't determine a cause of death, that is not normal.
It's not normal at all. Most of the time they can. Their percentages are high.
And why these are stringed into what I'm discussing tonight is that canines can't find a track. There's no witnesses ever to these people going in the water.
Now, is this different, David, from the disappearances in the parks? Are we talking about the same thing, or are we talking about two different kinds of bizarre circumstances?
Well, if you look at the profile points that you're applying to the disappearances in the parks and the forest, it's got to be related.
Okay.
And even though the people are found in the parks and the forest, there's a number of those cases where they couldn't find the cause of death either. Now, in my talks with the medical examiners about this, they said, yeah, that's not normal. We should be able to figure out what kills most people. Occasionally one comes around, but in the numbers you're quoting and the numbers you've identified on these issues, it doesn't make any sense. Now, if you talk about Manchester in the UK, 60 bodies have been found in the canals and the rivers since 2008. Between August 2010 and August 2012, 20 of these deaths happened. many of those cases, their coroners even said they can't figure out a cause of death. And just this last year, there was a new documentary that came out about it, and it essentially said everything I just told you. Some groups are calling it the pusher because the people end up in the water, and everyone agrees that no one's going to go in that water voluntarily, so they're thinking somebody's pushing them. But with all the closed-circuit cameras in Manchester and in all the closed-circuit cameras around universities in Wisconsin that I've written about, or in downtown Chicago, or in New York, downtown New York, nobody is ever seen going in the water.
David, I don't know. And in Manchester, in the United Kingdom, you say there have been 61 deaths so far.
Yeah, and that's probably a low number. There's probably been more as you go back in time, but right now they're just quoting 61. I get emails all the time from people, wanting profile points to look at and contact information, and they know if you Google it, you're just going to see tons and tons of articles about it. It seems like the UK is more open to talking about these things than they are in the U.S. I mean, in this last book, I talked about a series of clusters inside of Wisconsin, all centered around university locations. There's also one in downtown Chicago, and in New York City there's a cluster. Right now, probably the busiest cluster of these type of disappearances in the United States is Boston Harbor.
Is there some cult out there? I mean, this is strange. You've heard of the cases that are happening on the West Coast, near Vancouver and in those areas, where a foot with a shoe on is showing up on shore. Have you been tracking those, David?
Absolutely, yes.
That's strange too, isn't it?
Very strange. But you listen to authorities say, and they say, well, that's a body that just went in the water and
decomposed.
Yeah, foot came off, and because it's a shoe that floats, they find the foot. Yeah, it could be, but I'm not sure what's happening there, but
maybe once, but not many, many times. It's way too bizarre. David, stick with us. We're going to come back. We're going to talk more. We're going to take phone calls, and we may play for you the screaming audio of Henry McCabe calling his wife. Next hour, it'll be open lines. This hour, it'll be your phone calls with David Paulides as we talk about missing 411, disappearing people. Don't miss it. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, David Paulides. David, would you briefly set up again the Henry McCabe story? And we're going to play the clip from an old television station I worked at in 1978, KSTP in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We're going to play their little news clip of his disappearance. You'll hear some of that audio you were talking about, but briefly set up that situation again. Okay, so Henry was a revenue person for the state of Minnesota, straight arrow kind of guy, family man, never got in any trouble, was somebody that was always looked up to by people around him. He was out drinking with some friends on September 7th, 2015, about 2:30 in the morning. He's dropped at a Holiday gas station by a friend at Central and Hackman. He's a resident of Mounds View, kind of a northern part of Minneapolis, St. Paul. His wife's name is Corrine. He calls his wife while he's out and he's not home. She is asleep. It goes to voicemail. His body's found November 2nd at a place called Rush Lake. Supposedly died from freshwater drowning. Okay, let's listen to this report from KSTP in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
It's a voicemail unlike anything you've ever heard before. There are 2 minutes worth of noises, bizarre ones, but very little actual talking. Authorities confirmed the disturbing middle-of-the-night call came from Henry McCabe's cell phone. It was Labor Day, September 7th at 2:28 in the morning. McCabe's worried wife heard the message. Isn't my cell phone connected? Minnesota Community Policing Services is a nonprofit agency and acts as a go-between with police and the Liberian community. The leader is trying to help the family make some sense of this recording. The growls turned to high-pitched moans. Like he's moaning in pain? Like moaning in pain. The tortured grunts suddenly stop. There is silence. Then someone, either Henry or another person, says, stop it.
I try to picture where he was, what it might have been like, what circumstances would have made him sound like that.
The voicemail is in stark contrast to other articulate recordings of McCabe speaking at an event. He's a state auditor.
What is the justification? What is the right thing to do?
The message is one piece of evidence Mounds View police are reviewing. The police chief tells me even the FBI is analyzing the recording and voices for clues. The chief says the investigation took deputies here on Tuesday. To Rice Creek Park, which borders New Brighton, Mounds View, and Fridley, all areas where McCabe was reported seen or a cell phone ping placed him. Ramsey County Water Patrol searched, but came up empty. The tortured grunts suddenly stop. There is silence. Then someone, either Henry or another person, says, stop it.
I try to picture where he was, what it might have been like, what circumstances would have made him sound like that.
The voicemail is in stark contrast to other articulate recordings of McCabe speaking at an event. He's a state auditor.
What is the justification? What is the right thing to do?
The message is one piece of evidence Mounds View police are reviewing. The police chief tells me even the FBI is analyzing the recording and voices for clues. The chief says the investigation took deputies here on Tuesday. To Rice Creek Park, which borders New Brighton, Mounds View, and Fridley, all areas where McCabe was reported seen or a cell phone ping placed him. Ramsey County Water Patrol searched, but came up empty.
I've got to tell you, David, I've got chills running up and down my arms and spine listening to those sounds, the moans and the growls. They're horrible.
It's definitely something that's unbelievably odd, because when his body was found, they said that there was no sign of injury, no torture. He just drowned, George.
Jeez. I'm wondering if in his course of being a state auditor, if he was stumbling across something or a company that they were auditing and somebody got upset with him. I don't know.
Yeah, apparently the feeling of law enforcement is that it's just, quote unquote, a standard freshwater drowning, nothing unusual other than the tape.
And the tape is not just a drowning. There's something weird going on there.
Exactly.
Wow. I would put that way up on your charts, my friend. That's a strange one.
It's odd. And can you imagine being the wife and hearing that?
Oh, my God. On your answering machine, and you know it came from his phone?
Yeah.
The question, too, is,
where he is, what happened to him for weeks.
I mean, did he initiate the call? Did somebody else do it? Were they playing a game, a sick game? Who knows?
Well, again, if you go back to what I've chronicled in the past, that there have been several times where people have disappeared being on the phone, and it's as though they're seeing something that scares them to death, or something else is happening, but there are these conversations that end suddenly and the person's gone.
And I would assume police have no idea what that voice was.
Well, what is interesting, and I didn't bring it up, but I should have, is the FBI involvement. In my books, I explain that the FBI, in a strange way, shows up at these cases where they shouldn't even be involved.
Yes, you're right.
This isn't a case for the FBI. This is a local case of a missing guy, case that they don't normally investigate, but they're there to look into it. Now, they have a profiling team that looks at cases like this. When an agent goes out and monitors a case, looks into it, he writes a report. That report goes to the profiling team, and they look for other cases that have the similar elements, and they combine them. And that's how they gather and they get to know if something is matching in another part of the country.
It's almost like they have their own X-Files when it has to do with these cases.
For sure.
Let's go to the phones for you, David. Let's go to Rick, truck driving in Illinois, first-time caller for us. Hi, Rick. Go ahead.
How you doing, George?
Good. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask David if, in all of the victims, has he checked into like medical histories of these to to see if there's anything that's, linking, like blood type, RH, did they have surgeries? Because it sounds like most of them were in great shape physically, but I was just wondering if there was anything else that, maybe tied them together.
Okay, and I would assume finding out medical information of these disappearing people would be difficult, David. Were there any kind of similarities of any problems or anything?
So federal law prohibits the dissemination of your medical history. So that's something you should protect, and you shouldn't give it out. And blood type is something that's not listed in any coroner's report, any document like that. There's nothing seen as interest or value there. There's no DNA information in a coroner's report. All of those things are irrelevant towards the cause of death.
Jeez, strange. Rick, thanks. Let's go to Frank in Newport Beach, California now. Frank, you're up with us. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on the show. I have actually two stories of people I know personally who had kind of similar disappearance experiences on a college campus.
Love to hear it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the first time, they both happened my freshman year of college. The first time it was a buddy of mine from the dorms. We had all been out partying and stuff, and, we had been drinking, but all of us were coherent. We weren't like, blackout drunk or anything.
Right.
And anyways, we're going back to the dorms at the end of the night, and one of my buddies had his bicycle with him. So the rest of us are walking, and he's kind of, riding circles around us on his bike. Finally, he takes off. Once we get to campus, he takes off heading south towards the dorms. So we figure, okay, we're going to get back to the dorms. He's going to be there waiting for us. We get back to the dorms, and he's not there. So we wait around. We figure maybe he got food or something. Sorry. And so he doesn't turn up for like an hour. So we start calling him, texting him and stuff, and he, no response. Finally, he answers the phone after about 2 hours, and he, all we hear is like super heavy breathing, and we're trying to talk to him like, hey man, where are you? What's going on? Just super heavy breathing. And finally, we start hearing him. He's kind of like mumbling, like we can't really make out what he's saying. And then he hangs up the phone. So we went back out and started looking for him, around campus and stuff, and nothing. We couldn't find him. So the next day, he shows up around 1 p.m., comes back to the dorms, and he looks like crap. He's same clothes as the night before, looks terrible. And we're like, dude, what happened? And he goes, I don't know. I woke up in a field like 6 miles north of campus. The last time we saw him, he was biking south. He winds up 6 miles north. And he's like, yeah, I woke up in a field. My bike is gone. I have no idea what happened, and I just had to walk home. So to this day, we have no idea what happened to him.
What does your gut tell you?
I have no idea. I'm
just totally baffled on this one, huh?
Yeah, because we were all experienced with alcohol and stuff. Like, we knew how to handle our drinks. None of us were blacked out. We were all coherent. Otherwise, I would have figured, maybe he was just super drunk and had no idea. But we saw him heading south onto campus. Like, he rode onto campus, which is well lit. There's police officers patrolling, and he winds up far north. So super weird. Anyways, it gets weirder. About maybe 2 months later, my roommate doesn't come home after one night of partying.
Oh my God.
Which was normal for him. He had friends out that lived off campus who he would occasionally crash with at night, And so, he doesn't come home. I think, all right, he's just staying with friends. Next day, he still doesn't come back. Next morning, I figure, okay, maybe they got breakfast together. They're hanging out or whatever. By the afternoon, I'm starting to get weirded out here.
Yeah.
Sure enough, his friends that he would have been staying with come knock on my door and they say, hey man, have you seen so-and-so? And I go, no, I haven't seen him. I thought he was with you guys. Well, sure enough, they're like, dude, he left the party last night. None of us have seen him. He's not answering his phone. We don't know where he is. The last we heard from him, he posted a video like this it's that Snapchat where you post these short videos of yourself.
Right.
They're like, yeah, he posted a couple videos of him, like, riding his bike down a big street, just breathing super heavy. And we're like, what the hell? So finally, it turns out we call the county sheriff, thinking, we call the hospital, we call the sheriff, trying to figure out if they picked him up.
Right.
Sure enough, it turns out they picked him up about a half mile away from the field where my other buddy spent the night. They picked him up a half mile further down the same road, driving a golf cart. He lost his bike, somehow wound up on a golf cart.
But he was okay.
Yeah, totally healthy and everything, yeah.
What state was this happening in?
This was Santa Barbara County, California.
Do you get a lot of cases in California, David?
Not too many.
No.
The national parks, yes. The biggest cluster of missing people in a national park is Yosemite, and it's the biggest cluster in the world. And then there's a series of disappearances all up and down the Sierras. There's some just outside of L.A. There's one real famous one involving a fireman named Mike Herdman, disappeared kind of between L.A. and Santa Barbara in that area, but not a lot in that coastal zone.
David, what would you recommend to people who are going to go camping in a state park or a federal park?
First of all, always carry a personal locator transponder. They cost between, say, $150 and $300. And what they do is, once you activate it, it sends a signal up to a satellite. That satellite sends a message to NOAA, our governmental agency. They call the search and rescue group or law enforcement group in the area where you activated, and they can come out and find you within 10 feet. I have never heard of somebody disappearing carrying a firearm and a personal locator beacon.
Right.
So
you would think anybody who went out in those areas would have a personal locator and maybe a gun.
Yeah. I
have heard some hikers, I've known a couple that would not go out unless they had a gun. They think it's foolish not to.
Well, yeah, it's all about your comfort zone. Personally, I'm very comfortable with a gun. I've taught a lot of people how to use a gun. There's a lot of things in the wilderness that a gun could stop and not many other things will stop.
But if this stuff is unusual, if it's supernatural, gun's not going to help you at all.
And people ask me, well, why is the combination of the two important? I don't know. I'm just stating, and what I do in my books is I state a lot of facts. That's one of the facts. I can't find anybody missing that's carrying both those.
If for some reason, and this is weird, but you've got the personal locator on and it's beeping away, and you're picked up by a satellite, and they're able to track you at any given moment, and then you stumble into another dimension, for example, you're just gone. I would assume that the locator ends too, or would it continue from another dimension?
Well, let's even make it more a little simpler. Let's say you stumble into a cave.
Okay.
Stop transmitting. Even if you're under a thick canopy of trees, it's going to stop transmitting. So
it's going to get blocked, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take another call before the break if we can. Let's go to Howard in Vancouver, Washington. I think that's one of the areas where the feet show up with a shoe on. Hi, Howard.
Hi, George and David. Most of the cases you've been describing are pretty inexplicable. But I had an experience when I was a young guy about 50 years ago that might explain at least a few of them.
All right.
We were hiking around the base of Mount St. Helens, Washington State here. It's about 40 miles north of me.
Was that way before the volcano?
Yeah, that was well before that. That happened in 80. This is back in the mid-60s.
Okay.
And we were walking across the meadow, and suddenly my foot just went through the ground. I went clear up to my hip, and I managed to scramble and get out of there. And what we didn't realize or weren't really thinking about was that the entire area was saturated with these lava tubes, just honeycombed with them. Some of the longest ones in the world are there.
Wow.
And I managed to get out of that, but I could see how easily I could have just gone down in there just instantly, and no one had ever found me there.
Oh, my God.
And I I suspect that people that have been hiking in some of these wilderness areas where there's been volcanic activity, a lot of these things are totally uncharted. They're not on any maps. Nobody knows they're there. And some run close to the surface like that.
But Howard, wouldn't they, when somebody doubled back to look for their friend, wouldn't they see the hole where the tube was?
Well, you would think so, unless the rocks fell in on top of it or something, I would think. But there's one other thing, too. You're talking about these people that have disappeared near the rivers and streams.
Yeah.
Sometimes the current will undercut the bank and by quite a ways. And you could just, you could drop right through the surface there, too, and just disappear instantly. Now, one thing I wanted to throw out there was this boy that's missing up in Canada. If I were looking up there, I would be looking for things like old wells or sinkholes or anything of this nature.
Yeah, but this was on their property, and I'm sure the family knows exactly if they have those out there.
Well, you would think.
A sinkhole, you'd see that. You'd see the remains of it.
But an old well, sometimes they're covered, and you don't know it's there. That happens.
Well, yeah, but they'd know where to go check. Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah, well, just an idea.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. We're going to come back with more with David Paulides. I would think if somebody fell down a lava tube, there'd be a hole there. You'd look at it and go, oh, my God, we just lost him, but you'd know where he went. We'll be back. Open lines next hour here on Coast to Coast AM. And we're going to come back and take final questions and your stories with David Paulides as we talk about his work, Missing 411, an incredible series of books. And, of course, he's got a movie coming up on that, too. So you want to make sure you're part of that when it comes out. Welcome back. Dave Paulides with us. David, once the movie comes out, will people be able to get it from your website? How do they find it?
Well, that's a great question, and we're not sure what the distribution arm is going to be right now. We've had a couple interesting offers, but I really don't know right now, George. I wish I could explain it better.
Okay.
I don't.
All right, but when the time comes, of course, you will let us know, and we'll let everybody else know, too.
Thank you.
That's good. David, final calls just ahead here. If you were to summarize what's happening, and I you know how I always love to pin you down for what you think it is, but I'm not going to do that because it's too, I don't want to say confusing, but there's just too many possibilities out there, isn't there?
There are, and just to clarify, one thing that one of the last callers asked was, if the river undercuts the bank, the person will fall in. These people don't disappear near the river. Most of them are never even seen near a river or a body of water.
Right. They end up in there, but they disappear elsewhere.
Exactly. There's an entire series of Wisconsin students that have disappeared, and they were last seen in the middle of some type of establishment, a bar, a restaurant, and then all of a sudden, they're in the water dead. There's one person that has survived, and they said, the last thing I remember, I was dancing in the middle of a bar. I woke up floating down the middle of the river amongst pieces of ice. He was able to crawl out of the river and happened to crawl out right next to a hospital and lived. He doesn't remember how he got in the river, what got him in the river, nothing. And there's 4 hours lost in that.
4 hours, missing time, gone.
Yep.
Really, it really is. There's something else going on. I mean, personally, I'm beginning to think that they're falling into some kind of time warp or dimension or something, that there may be these ley lines all over the planet and people somehow disappear like the Bermuda Triangle, but they're just simply gone, especially if it happens so quickly and people don't hear or see anybody disappearing. They're just, you're walking with somebody, they're a few feet behind you, you turn around, they're gone.
I get those all the time in emails and things, and what I ask those people is I say, if that was happening and it was indiscriminate, then you or I would be walking down a mall or down the street in New York one day, and we'd see somebody in front of us, and they'd all of a sudden disappear. But we never, ever hear of any witnesses that can visually say that they saw it.
Saw it, no. Well, as you said, don't be last.
Right.
All right, let's go to the calls again. Let us pick it up by going to Thomas in La Jolla, California. Hi, Thomas. Go ahead.
George, thank you for taking my call. Mr. Paulides, it's a privilege to speak to you. I was curious, here in North America, there are many indigenous tribes, and I'm curious concerning the missing person clusters that you talk about. If the native indigenous tribal elders, tribal shamans, etc., is there any tribal history that can contribute to the possibility of finding out what happened in these missing person clusters?
So one of my best friends is a Cheyenne Arapaho Native American chief. He just so happens to be a 40-year law enforcement man on top of that.
That helps.
Yeah, he's really got both sides of the spectrum covered. We talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And he says, well, Dave, you know, the Native Americans believe that they came from the stars. They're star people. And he said that when he goes, you know, after reading your books, he goes, I remember when I was a kid and we were in the middle of the wilderness camping, that we were always told never to leave the light of the campfire. And he says, you know, he goes, now I'm thinking, well, maybe they were really trying to send us another message, but they just didn't want to scare us. But they always said, no, you're safe by the light of the fire. Don't leave that. And there have been disappearances of Native Americans over the years. The biggest group ever is in Mesa Verde National Park. And if you look at the history of where they went, why they left, even the National Park Service can't answer that question.
Dave, has anybody reported large thunderbirds, large birds? These things are huge, huge. They were indigenous to Native Americans, you know, in their myths and stories. But has that come up at all? And I would assume if a large bird swoops down and picks somebody up, people are going to see it or hear it, the flapping something. But does that come up at all?
Well, not only what you said, but wouldn't the person that was picked up be screaming?
Oh, I would.
Yeah. You know, it's been brought up many times by people saying, well, is this a possibility? Well, I'm not going to say no, it's never a possibility, because anything can be a possibility, but the reality is that if somebody picked up a small child, I think the kid would be screaming, number one. Number two, I think people in the area would see it if it was that large carrying.
Yes, exactly. Now, are we getting reports of UFO sightings in the area where people disappear?
You know, I wish it would be that simple, George.
It's not, is it?
No, it's not.
Darn. What else is reported that is unusual in terms of the area? Anything?
Weather. And
tell me about that.
In a high percentage of the stories, either as the disappearance seems to be occurring or immediately after the disappearance, bad weather sets into the area. And I mean, sometimes it's a sudden onset. Sometimes it can be fog. It could be extreme cold, rain, snow. And it inhibits the searchers at one way or another, or it inhibits the people that are there to continue to look. And weather is a continuing factor in many of these things.
Next up, we go to Kenneth in Whitewater, California. Kenneth, it's your turn, sir.
Hi, how are you?
Good, Kenneth.
It's good to talk to you again. My question for David was, are any psychics ever consulted on these cases? I'm a sensitive, and strange things that I have witnessed during my life. I'm 80 years old. So I have some questions as to paranormal events also. But I'm wondering if psychics are ever, talked to on these cases.
Psychics or remote viewers, David?
Great question. So I am not someone that would be bashful about using one, except I am very careful about who I share my information with and the competency of the person that I'm working with. Now, on remote viewers, I've sent email to some of the remote viewers you've interviewed on your show. They won't even answer the email. And I'm not sure why. There's one group where there's a part-time host to your show, and they called a remote viewing group, and they demanded money to do the work. And I wouldn't go to the victim's family and ask for the money.
No, that's inappropriate.
And unfortunately, I think that when you're dealing with victims and victims' families, you have to show a high level of professionalism and sincerity.
And caring.
And you can't be throwing random thoughts and ideas at families because you quickly lose that. And again, I'm not adverse to using those kind because I think that there's a place to use them. And I know that remote viewers have value. Thing is, apparently they don't want to do it.
I remember the case of the missing Sean Hornbeck from Missouri. And Psychic would be on a TV show and would come on my show. And she has since passed away. And I booted her off, by the way, prior to, obviously. But she told the family on national television that Sean Hornbeck, their son, was dead. And, the bereavement and the sadness and everything that they went through. Well, years later, the kid shows up as a teenager. He's found. He was being kept by someone, and he was able to finally break loose. Unbelievable story. But, to simply say willy-nilly, he's dead, and then the kid shows up years later. The family, can you imagine the horror they went through all those years, David?
That's the premier example of why you've got to be really careful about what information you give the family and the people you're working with.
Roger is truck driving in Missouri. First-time caller for Raj. Go ahead, Roger.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. This is an honor and a pleasure.
Sure thing.
You kind of stole it from me just a second ago when you said UFOs. I was wondering if these could be some type of abduction, because you said that a lot of them are physically fit and everything. And I wondered, do they keep the ones that are physically fit? And the poor lady and her child that were found naked, I always think of something like this. Were they getting examined and they found out that she was sick and that she was not a healthy specimen, so they kind of just sent her back to where they got her, and they, I hate to say it, but they I guess, she came back, she was deceased. But do you think that there might be some type of thing like that? Was there any type of marks found on them? Was there any type of, medical history where that she was found out that she did have something where they may have said, well, we don't want this type of person, we just want healthy specimens? And, I don't know. It just seems weird. And because, like you say, there's no marks where they've been drug off. There's nothing. There's no sound. It's just like they're there and they're gone. And then they return just kind of like the same way. Boom, they're back.
Well, you cannot, Raj, you cannot rule out the possibility of UFO ET abductions. That's in the mix. It's in the grouping. In terms of how high is it on the list, that's anybody's guess, but you can't rule that out. What I find interesting about this, David, is if it's ET related, they're starting to kill some of these people, and that's pretty unusual. What do you think?
I think that whatever is happening here, especially with the water-related deaths, whoever, they know what this GHB is doing to the people. And by putting them in the water and having them drown, it's easy to just relinquish and say, hey, you know what, stupidity, they drowned in the water, too much drinking. It goes to plausible deniability. And I think that's the best example. Now, in the woods, the plausible deniability is hypothermia. In the old days, they used to say, well, he died from exhaustion. You don't hear that anymore. But I think that there's something. In the last 6 months, I've had 3 emails, and they all said this, and I thought, wow, that's weird that 3 people came up with it. And that is that they asked me, they said, well, Dave, there's no marks on the bodies. I said, correct. there's no acts of violence on the body. Correct. And then about the third time we exchanged, they would say, well, it sounds like they stole their soul.
Stole their soul. Whoa. Donald in Kent, Ohio, welcome to the program. Hi, Donald.
Brother George, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your program. And Brother Dave, I want to thank you for your courage and tenacity. Obviously, there is a religious component here. You know, I grew up Roman Catholic, and in our religion, we have what was called the incubus and the succubus that, you know, basically cause sleep paralysis. I don't want to go there right now. Where I want to go is in Psalm 74. The dark places of the earth are full of the habitations of cruelty, and in Revelation 5, no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open up the scroll. So obviously you're talking about this water component, and I think there's also like a mineral component with rock fields, hills, mountains, things of that. The one gentleman brought up blood type. Nobody checks that out. They ought to do a hormone profile, a high level of adrenaline, the fight or flight hormone.
Mm-hmm.
There's other things that they can check on. Now, with UFOs in Mexico, they've been observed flying into volcanoes, and some people have seen UFOs fly into Mount Shasta. So,
sure.
There's a lot of things. You're doing an excellent job. What about witness confusion? When these people disappeared, did people have like a faintness or a confusion, things of that nature?
I've never heard of that. The only thing that comes up along those lines is sometimes a person will tell their friends, I don't feel good, and I'm going to go back to the car, I'm going to go home, and that is the separation point between them and the others, and then they disappear.
And they're
that's
gone.
come up quite a few times.
And they're gone. It's almost like something has triggered them and, centered them to not feel well so they could walk away or break away. Maybe that's part of the M.O.
Could be.
And it just seems like has anybody disappeared in the middle of a group, right in the middle of the group, and they're gone?
Several times. In fact, there's a series of college-aged men in Wisconsin and Minnesota that disappeared almost under those exact circumstances in a bar. And their friends said, we never saw them leave the bar. And there's one case, a very famous case out of Columbus, Ohio. A medical school student was on the second floor, only one way in and out of this place, and it was filled with CCTV cameras. The detective said he watched the cameras for 24 hours over a 3-day period, every camera, and he said the man never left the bar. He was never seen again either.
That's weird. It really is. David, your next project, what are you going to work on next? You don't stop, I know that.
Well, what I tell people is that, some people get frustrated that I never say exactly what I'm thinking about what may be happening. And, George, to be an expert on UFOs or, paranormal or whatever, it takes years of study.
Yes.
Well, I'm studying this one little segment of missing people, and every year or so I'm finding another spoke in that wheel. And if I can delineate that spoke from everything else, it helps us to understand what is happening. And until I hit that wall where I say, hey, I can't find out anymore, I'm going to keep looking. So I'm still looking for another spoke, and I have no doubt that I'll find it in the next year. But for right now, I'm pretty satisfied that the guys going in the water, the people missing in rural areas, national parks, national forests, I'm solid there. I know what's happening, and we could almost track it that it's going to happen again.
Because you're so close to it, David, is it scary for you or not?
It's scary. It's very, very scary when somebody goes missing, and I can almost say, hey, this is going to happen. It happened with Mike Herdman in just south of Santa Barbara, north of Los Angeles, a fireman that disappeared. I happened to be on a show, and they said, well, where's he going to be found? I said, well, if everything fits, he's going to be found on the hillside, an area that had been searched many times before. Son of a gun, that's exactly
there he
what
was. Wow. All right, David, my friend, stay in touch and let us know when the movie's ready. We'll put a little clip up for you on the website. David Paulides, of course, Missing 411, website linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Up next, open lines on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast, and many thanks to David Paulides for staying with us 3 hours talking about a most riveting subject. My gosh. Okay, but we've got open lines for you this hour. Just about anything goes, so get ready to make the calls. Lots of things going on today on this planet, and you want to talk about it, we can. Next on Coast to Coast AM. And we're back, and don't forget, we're going to take your text questions as well for Tom, so we'll do several of those this hour as well. Here at Coast to Coast, and let us go to the phones to get things started because, folks, this hour is going to fly by. Let's go to Faith in Dayton, Ohio, east of the Rockies. Hello, Faith. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Now I cannot sleep.
Me too. Same
But
thing.
You know what? I'm a coastie, so
Good.
it's okay. I have a couple of questions. One is I'm wondering if it could be something to do with government, ours.
You can't rule that out either. See, David is very non-committal. When I've tried to pin him down in the past about what this might be, he doesn't want to say. I think he has his own idea, but he doesn't want to say.
I noticed that.
But when you say, government involvement, anything, I think you can't rule it out.
No. That one in Columbus, Ohio was really crazy because I'm near Columbus.
Oh, too close, way too close.
It gives me the jeebies.
I mean, can you imagine being with somebody, a friend, a loved one, anybody, a child, you turn around and Faith, they're gone.
Perhaps that would mess me up. I don't know. I think I'd be done.
I don't think I'd be the same. I mean, if something...
Oh, no.
No.
Not even.
Scary stuff. Okay, thanks for being on the program. Next up, let's go to Todd in Battlefield, Missouri. Welcome to the program. Hi, Todd.
Yes, in fact, I love your show.
Thank you, sir.
Just I was agreeing with your previous caller. This sounds a lot like the old MK Ultra experiments that were conducted by the CIA in the late 60s and up to the early 70s, which they have admitted they actually happened, and they were conducted on college campuses, like one previous caller stated. Only a government agency would know whether somebody had a cell phone or not, because they would have access to people knowing whether they have cell phones or not, to their numbers. And because when you get a legal firearm, at least, you fill out paperwork, basically stating it's like who has a firearm, at least legally. They would know who, at least by process of elimination, who doesn't have a firearm. As I said, once again, it's like I have a military background, which I won't really get into, but there's a lot of devices out there that can either block cell phone signals or basically through Google just kind of blur you out in your location. So this sounds a lot like maybe a rogue government faction. What do you think?
Well, it's just so weird. The fact that so many people disappear with other people there, that's what's so weird, with no sounds and stuff. I just don't get how, if you're with somebody and they're 10 feet behind you or 100 feet behind you, I think you're going to hear something, right? I mean, no government is that quiet where they can sneak up and take you and grab you, and you'll never know what happened. You turn around and, you'd see something. Now, there's something else strange here. I think it's one of several possibilities. One, people are naturally dying. They're wandering off. They get lost, and they die. They're stuck in the elements out there. Two, there are murderers out there or serial killers. I don't think you can ever discount that possibility. There are lots of sick people out there, folks. Lots of sick people. And then the third possibility, I don't think it's Bigfoot. I think there's some kind of portal, and one of my favorite words, that people are stumbling into, some other dimension that's out there, and they just kind of wander in there. But why doesn't everybody wander in there? If a whole group's there, it's the last person that disappears. That's what's so baffling about it. Tom, you've got a text for me, and what do you have?
We do. This will switch gears just a little bit. It's not a stretch for you at all. This is from Myra in Salt Lake City, Utah. I really like your stories of your grandkids. I am 97 and don't have any myself, 97. But I want to know if you can actually describe for us the joy they bring to your life.
Oh, they're great, all of them. As a matter of fact, they're coming back this way for Easter. And I've got 6. Ari is going to be 22 in June, and she's in her last year of college. And then Charlie, little Charlotte, we call her Charlie, that's what she wants to be called, is 4 years old. That's the one that looks like
Mrs. Doubtfire.
Matilda and Mrs. Doubtfire. And she acts like her, too. So, and then
She's cute.
In between, from Ari, I've got, and this is chronological, going down in age. We've got Mia, and then Kaya, and then Gavin, and then we've got Simon, and then we've got Charlie. And my 3 kids each have 2. And they're great. I mean, I couldn't ask for better grandchildren and better kids. I'm very blessed there.
Did you ever think you'd have that many?
No. Heck no. Heck no. Well, when I was 20 years old, I mean, we had Wendy, and that was 20 years old. I was working at a television station in Detroit. I was going to college full-time, working on my degree in communications, and I had a baby on the way. I mean, you talk about responsibility at an early age, Tom.
Wow.
Long time ago. But, so that's it.
See, not a stretch for you, huh?
That's it. 97 years old, by the way. That's great. She keeps on plugging along there, huh?
And she's texting. Isn't that amazing?
That is fantastic.
In itself.
Ask her if she's got Snapchat.
Well, I can't really ask her, but...
Text her back.
Wouldn't that be funny if she sends them?
Let's go to Patty in Seattle, Washington. Hey, Patty, welcome to the program.
Thank you, George. How are you?
Sure thing. Good.
Yeah, George, I've been trying to get a hold of you a long time about this. I'm not psychic or anything, but I had a waking vision about 3 days after that plane, the
MH370.
That 370 went missing, and it was so vivid that it just imprinted on my brain, and it just keeps playing over and over. I've written it down, I've drawn pictures of it and everything, but I have to tell you, this is what I saw in the vision as to what happened to that plane. And it starts with, I have a three-quarter view of the plane resting in a dry river delta, like it took a pretty sloppy landing coming in.
Okay.
The right wing is up in the air. The opposite wing, the far wing, is kind of dug a little bit into the bank, and it's one side of the wheels is up on the ground, off of the ground. And in this vision, I saw soldiers all dressed in khaki, all tan-colored gear, as well as several different personnel carriers in military-looking rigs. And these soldiers all had their backs to me except the far one, so I couldn't tell a race or anything with them, but they were wearing very specific round-top hats with a brim on them.
What color?
And they had the little shield that goes around the back that protects the neck from the sun.
Yeah. What color hats were they?
Pardon?
What color hats were they? Because that's important.
Khaki sand-colored.
Okay.
Yeah, and also they were unpacking and running towards this plane with cargo netting.
Did the plane look intact? It wasn't broken up, was it?
Oh, it was not broken up. Now, the only thing I could say would be the right side of the plane, as if you're sitting in the plane, the right side of the plane was dug into the bank a little bit, and it looked like it had caught something and caused the plane to tilt up on one side. Okay? And of the other details, I could see no signs of any passengers. You know, there were no, like, people. All these guys running towards it, they were unpacking the cargo netting and everything. I wanted to say about the river, like a dry river delta, you know, where no water had been for quite a while. But the banks of it were high enough that it would go over the top of the plane and it couldn't be seen from ground level.
Okay, and even though you couldn't see the passengers, by the way the plane had landed, could you assume that the passengers were okay?
I would say so, yes, because the plane did not look damaged. There was no front damage or anything. Just when it had come to rest, it had caught a wing in the sandy bank, and that had caused it to tip up at the very end. And otherwise, the plane looked completely intact.
Did it look like the plane could be towed somewhere?
From the view that I was looking at it, that would have been behind me. It would either have been towed back out the way it came in, or forward, to an area I couldn't see. But I would say, yes, it can be removed. And they were planning on hiding it until then. So you know what we're all worried about here.
Absolutely.
Somebody's going to use that plane for something.
Well, I had a guest on just a week ago who was talking about that very thing, about China probably wanting to do it. I'm not sure China would do it, but somebody might be. Now, they said they found some more wreckage and that they think it might be from that plane. Who knows? Let's go to Lucas in Vancouver, Canada now. Lucas, welcome to the program.
Hello, George. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I got a question. Well, I got a sort of a theory as to maybe why people are going missing. I've been kind of thinking about it. There's a lot of conspiracies, of course. You got many people on your show, and they all have their input on the different things that goes around in the world.
Yeah.
And one thing that I thought was perhaps when the two types of people that go missing are the ones that go in national parks and one in cities and colleges. So you have the urban center, and then you have sort of like the parks. And to throw people off, for example, in national parks, they always end up with hypothermia, drowning, or people automatically assume it's maybe animals. So it's almost as if people are disappearing, and then we automatically just say, well, it's due to drowning or animal hypothermia. With the city colleges, it's GHB, it's too much drinking, or they drowned in the water. And it's almost as if something's trying to throw us off from finding out the truth. And the last thing that you guys played about
that clip, yeah,
person.
That was horrible, wasn't it?
It was, and I don't know, I got chills up my spine as well. Like
Me too.
And it did kind of sound like a sort of like a creature, kind of at one point. And then when they said that there was a person that said stop. And then, when dead, it's kind of like maybe something told whatever that was to stop frightening the person. And then, like, you even said that it's maybe a portal. And I was thinking, like a lot of the movies that we have, like sci-fi movies, when people go through a portal, it's like a vacuum, and perhaps when they go through it, they don't have any air. And as they pop out through the other side, they're just, they're missing clothing or whatnot. Yeah. And it's like everything's sucked out of them, all the energy sucked out of them. So, I mean, you got these different theories. And with the German descent, the people that are going missing, I had a theory perhaps there's a Nazi connection. When the Nazis all left Europe and took off running, perhaps, I know there's a theory of them going to Antarctica, the hollow earth theory. It sounds really crazy, but perhaps there's places that they're hiding, and maybe they need people from German descent for whatever reason. Maybe more genetic testing. I don't know. It's just a theory.
You're right on there on a lot of things, by the way. Got to tell you this really sad story that occurred. I have, when I'm in Los Angeles, I've gotten to know a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people. And there was one guy who was just a neat guy. Loved the show, just was full of life. And his daughter, her name is Allie Cobran. And Allie is an up-and-coming actress. I mean, she is really doing a lot of work out there in Hollywood. And great girl, very attractive, and just the ideal daughter, and is doing well in Hollywood. She sent me a text from her father's phone a day or so ago, and says she had horrible news. And I just had seen him like 4 days ago. And said that he had died Sunday morning, and they're going to cremate him. Unbelievable. But the message here I want to impart in everybody is how quickly your life can change and everything around you change. I mean, I just saw the guy, and now he's gone. Now he's dead. And so my simple theory is truly live every day like it's your last, because you just never know when that clock is going to stop. Mike in Ohio, take it away, Michael.
Hey, good morning, George. How you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Hey, I was going to send you an email, but I got busy. I'm going to start a blog.
Oh, are you? Cool.
Yeah, it's going to be for charity, and it's going to help people, and stuff
good
like
for
that.
You.
And I was going to talk to David because I had an experience in 2010.
What happened?
I was in Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area. I'm of German descent. I usually run about 6 miles a week. And I was out there, and I had an experience that scared the hell out of me.
Same kind of thing, like a disappearance?
Yeah, almost, like I almost could have been. And I've always had the propensity to just sense evil.
Yeah.
So, like, 1 second I sensed it. The second second, I was like, are you sure? Sure this is what it is? And yes, and by the third second, I was turning around, running the other way.
So you were jogging, you were out jogging.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And what did you feel, though? I mean, did you see anything?
No, it doesn't feel like a sense of fear for me because I wasn't, other people, I guess I could say, could be afraid.
Were you alone?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And it was just a sense of ultimate evil. More than fear for me. But I could see how other people could be afraid, and maybe, people of German descent don't get afraid as easily.
Well, now, did this evil feel as if it was engulfing you?
Almost. Except for the way out. Except for the way that I ran, that I was coming running down the trail. I turned around and immediately, boom.
You literally ran out of it, didn't you?
I tell you, George, I could run 2 miles in about 11 and a half minutes.
Going to get you to the Olympics.
And when I cleared the tree line, I had about 150 yards of grass to go through before I got to the parking lot. I could still sense it behind me. And I got to the truck, and I was gone.
That's strange.
And the only thing I could suggest to people, David suggested a personal locator, weapons, I could see that. But dogs. But then I found out with the dogs, you have to have more than 3.
Why?
And you have to teach the dogs to run ahead of you. Because when they stop, you stop.
You stop.
They won't go on. They won't go on if they sense evil.
Now, do you think whatever's happening is truly supernatural?
Yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
It's just something that I felt. I mean, it could have been just a regular person or something, or maybe I read their aura at a distance.
Yeah, but you would have seen them, right?
Right, because it was late fall, November. All the leaves were off the trees. I could see 100 yards, even though there were scattered trees through the area. You could hear crunching of the leaves if someone was approaching you. So unless they were on like the trail that was kind of.
What if there's something going on in this universe, not necessarily this planet, where we have these other dimensions, and you almost stumbled into it and you felt it? Now, what does evil feel like, by the way?
It's just hard to explain. It's just that you're almost, like you said, engulfed by a presence that, all your senses are basically gone. Like you say, you don't have all your senses, sight, sound, touch, and there's just a presence, say, behind you, whispering in your ear, or that presence that they can do anything they want to you forever and ever and ever.
Oh, they sure can. It is kind of frightening. It really is. We're going to come back in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM and take more of your open line phone calls here. I like doing that in the middle of the week every once in a while. So we will do that and wrap things up with your final calls next. Okay, we're back here. Final segment of Open Lines. Tomorrow, by the way, on Coast to Coast, we've got another series of great programs for you. Ted Brower joins us as we're going to be talking about his work called Breakthrough Health for the first couple hours. He's going to be talking about GMOs, Morgellons, chemtrails. And then Ken Hansen joins us talking about the Visionaries, his latest work about just what the apocalypse holds for all of us. So make sure you're part of that Coast to Coast show. Let's go back to the calls now. We'll go to Ron in Idaho to get things started. Go ahead, Ron.
Hi, George.
Hi.
I didn't get in time
for David?
David, but here in Idaho last summer we had a little boy go missing. And
same kind of situation?
Yeah, they were camping near a little lake in the Salmon National Forest, and the videos that I saw of it, the area was fairly well open, so there was no place a person could really hide so much, and the campground was full, so they moved farther down on the lake where there was nobody, and they were busy getting ready to go fishing or whatever they were doing, and all of a sudden that little boy is gone. He was like 2 to 4 years old.
Oh, my God. And
they hunted for over a month, and nothing was found. And then here this spring, just a news report about 3 weeks ago, they're trying to prosecute the family. But
yeah, the family's always the first that they look at all the time.
Really a sad case, and I was thinking, when people were talking about how they go missing, I was thinking like, remember that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where the cloaked alien?
Mm-hmm.
That they were fighting the
Predator.
I'm wondering if there aren't cloaked UFOs and aliens kicking these people out.
That could be, Ron. That's a sad story, by the way, that you reported. Let's go to Jan in Brooklyn. Hi, Jan. Good morning to you.
Hi. It's good what the guy just said because I have two different things. But my friend Benjamin called me this morning, and he started saying that they have they can make people invisible. In fact, you can even pay money to this university, like a couple of $100, and they'll teach you how to do it.
How to become invisible?
Yeah. So, I mean, they might
$200? That's not bad, huh?
No, I said maybe $400 or $500. I'm not sure of the amount.
How do they do it? How do you become invisible like that?
I don't know. You have to, this course in the school. He told me about it.
Well, go sign up for the school and let us know how it works.
You going to pay for me?
Well, you got money, Jan. You're one of the richest women in Brooklyn, I'm told.
No, I got messed up. My girlfriend died. She had $1 million, and the rabbi stole the money.
The rabbi took the cash?
Yeah, he had her in a assisted living home, and he made himself power of attorney, and she had Alzheimer's, and
oh my
it was a whole mess. It was a real mess. I was trying to get her to do a will. It was crazy. Anyhow, you take the course. Why me? Anyhow, my theory is just also that maybe it might be a sex thing. If they're taking such good-looking guys and everything, they might be, using them for sex or something. But let me just tell you something else.
All right.
Because it's going to be for tomorrow's program. You can ask the person tomorrow. The psychic said that they're doing like GMOs and vaccinations and chemtrails to dumb down the people because the new babies being born are on such a high level that they need to dumb us down.
Interesting theory. That could be. Jan, that might be. Hey, send me an email of where the disappearing course is. We'll check into it. All right, Tommy, we got more text messages. Our final one for the night. What do you have?
We do. I have a real quick message for you. Billy G just texted, and he says hello, and he is listening.
I love Billy G.
Yeah, he just got back from, I think, Cuba.
Oh, he went to Cuba? Really?
Yeah, they played.
When the president was there?
I don't know if that was around the time, but he sent me some pictures. So this text is from James in Fort Myers, Florida. He says, I am a practicing magician, and I wanted to know if you are a fan of magic and who you consider to be the best.
I am a fan of magic. Some of the old-timers, of course. Tommy, don't do that. Don't clear your mouth with your mic open. All right?
What's that?
I said don't clear your throat with your mic open.
I think you're hearing things.
No, I'm hearing you. So let's... Harry Black, I think it was Harry Blackstone. He was one of the great magicians of all time. He was good. Copperfield is good. Chris Angel is more of an illusionist. He's good too. But they're all good.
Did you ever see those shows where they gave the secrets? Those are what I liked.
What kind of secrets?
Like they do these specials. I don't know if it was NBC or what it was, and they would actually have magicians who would
I
tell
remember
the secrets.
That. I remember that. Not a lot of magicians will tell you their real secrets.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Sure.
Let's go to Terry in Toronto, Canada. Hey, Terry, you're on the air.
Hey, George. I was wondering, are you coming back to Toronto this year? And if so, is it possible to get Dr. Sky on the schedule?
I'd love to get Dr. Sky. There's no immediate plan to come back to Toronto yet. I know Tom's checking into it, but I would love it. I mean, we've been there 4 years in a row, and it's been just great for us.
Oh, it'd be great to have you back. I've been there the last 3 years.
Oh, thank you. Did you wait in the meet and greet line, too?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, I remember you now.
Thank you.
All right, Terry, thanks. You take care. Let's go to Jerry in Sacramento. Hello, Jerry, take it away.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing.
Hey, just a little change up on the scary disappearance stuff that
Sure.
happened. Now, the one thing about the university where they teach you to become invisible, I think the only thing that disappears is your money.
Maybe.
But this happened to me a while back, and I was sitting in our local Taco Bell enjoying a burrito and looking around. It was like 1:30 in the morning, and how much traffic there is. The Taco Bell, there's people coming in and out, in and out. Just how busy our lives are now, 24 hours a day. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there, and I look out the window to my left, and here is my cat somehow got out of the car, and it's snipping the front tire of a car that's just getting ready to back up.
Oh, no.
And so I jump. Yeah, I love this guy. And I jump out of my car, and my phone and food goes flying, and I go run over and baby, please come here. And I'm tapping on the window of the lady's car, telling her not to move. Don't move, my cat. You know, she's looking at me like I'm crazy, which I am. But and so I drop to my knees, and I look under the car, and there he is underneath the car, and the lady, thank God, had stopped. And I baby, come here, please. And he just takes off running across the parking lot. And cars are coming in and out. I'm going, oh my God! And I'm running after him. He stops and he looks at me, sees me coming, and his eyes get really big, and he takes off running full blast right out into the street. And this is a real busy intersection. Now I'm chasing him down the side of the road. It's starting to get dark. My sides are hurting. I'm chasing him so far. He goes up the on-ramp on the freeway. Okay, now he goes down into a gully along the side of the freeway.
Oh, he's going everywhere.
And I'm George. I'm just thinking this is not going to end well. I just know it. And I'm running down the gully behind him, tripping over people that were homeless people camping down there. And I'm in the dark now. And I just see my cat's tail just go disappear into the dark.
And they're fast. I mean, you can't catch them.
And I'm sitting there, and my heart was coming out of my throat. I love this guy so much. And I just didn't know why he did this to me. So I'm walking back to my car to get my flashlight and come back here and continue looking. And as I approached back to the car, there's my cat sitting in the window looking at me.
No.
And he's thinking, Dad, now why did you just change that strange cat so far?
That's funny. That's a great
It wasn't even my cat.
That wasn't yours at all? Oh,
The one
you
I
thought it
changed.
was. Oh,
The one mine was still in my window, so it was just a cat that looked like him.
that's I thought he raced back and got there.
Yeah, oh well.
Okay. Hey, thanks for the call.
Thanks for everything.
Okay. Let's go next to Tammy, a truck driving in Kentucky. Hi, Tammy. Welcome to the show.
Hey, George.
Hi.
Hey, I got two things. First, I am a grandma who does believe in putting the leash on the youngins. Yeah.
I mean, I used to think it was weird. Now I understand why they did it.
Yeah, they can get away from you too quick in a crowd. So
Oh, yeah. Or somebody could
I am
grab
one of
them. Yep.
Yeah. And secondly, my heart's kind of pounding on this one. It's about the disappearance of people. I had two encounters back in 2009, extraterrestrial encounters. The second one involved also reptilians. And I can only go into it briefly because there are so many details involved. But when I told my story to someone that I have known all of my life, this person had also had an encounter back in the early 70s. And when I was telling them what had happened, they begged me to not talk about my encounters because of that exact reason. They said that the extraterrestrials and such do not want people like me who have had the encounters talking about it. And if we keep talking about it, they come get us. They take us. And so my heart's kind of pounding on this one. I haven't really talked about it or discussed it for probably at least 3 or 4 years now. But every time I listen to one of your shows and they the topics are similar to this with the UFO visitations, extraterrestrials, I just, I want to call in, but I hesitate. But tonight I went ahead and went with it because, it hits really close to home with
It sure does.
With the fact that now that I have that in my head that, you know, I mean, it hasn't happened yet because I'm still here, but
You never know.
yeah, and I'm, you know, if it happens, the problem is, come back, I won't be alive to tell about it. But I seriously thought of trying to get in touch with your friend Linda Moulton Howe.
She's on next Thursday, by the way, next week. You should.
And possibly tell her the story beginning to end, because there are so many tentacles.
Well, would you like her email address?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's easy to remember, Tammy. It's earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Simple as that. earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Let's go to our first-time caller, Richard in North Dakota. Hey, Rich, go ahead.
Hey, George, good to talk to you.
You too.
Long-time listener, first-time caller, and you're a great show, so I guess I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
Anyways, I was calling about your show tonight with David, and I just wanted to say that I had read a lot about this subject just because I'm infatuated with some reason, and
I don't blame you.
A lot of reports from park rangers and stuff, and people that have had these kind of ideas, and basically I just wanted to share my opinion on what I feel like it is, and I feel like David might feel what it is some kind of intelligent entity, ancient in origins, that lies on the fringe of society. I believe that is biologically capable of opening in between our dimension and the next, the dimension that lies right next to ours. And I feel like they're able to somehow pull us in there, and that's why they prey on those that are the last in line, or those that are alone, or those that are weak or young. And for some reason, though, I feel like they don't want us for our possessions or even our skin or to eat us or anything like that. I feel like it's more like they want us for our energy.
But why do they kill these people?
Well, I believe maybe it's just the shock of pulling them in and out of these dimensions, and just the shock of that on our own body, that we're not capable of that, and they are. And when they do that to us and they zap the energy out of us, then then we're no longer alive. But I feel like there's something out there that just preys on the weak and preys on the alone, and I just had to share my opinion on that.
It could be. It is frightening, though, isn't it?
Absolutely, it certainly is.
Richard, thanks. I mean, there are two subjects that are really, really frightening. The one with David Paulides, the one you've just heard, missing people, and then the black-eyed children with David Weatherly really gets to me. I mean, that is really a scary topic as well. Well, we're going to wrap up this night, but we've got more Coast to Coast shows for you all week long. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and if those of you are looking to meet up with people, paranormaldate.com and conspiracydate.com as well. That's been around for a couple months. That's a companion website there, and people are starting to, because it's growing, they're starting to meet, and it's really cool. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Borles, and George Knapp, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.